Every good show needs a hook, something to draw the audience in and make them want to continue watching. After all, with so many television channels, streaming services, movies, video games, etc., people have a lot of options on how they can spend their free time. The hook needs to sell the show to the audience, to tell them what the show is about and why they should continue watching. Now, there is no set-in-stone rule about what constitutes a hook. It could be anything. A dramatic opening sequence, a great story, witty dialogue, a charismatic actor or actress, and ideally, more than one of these. Take Disney's most popular Star Wars live action, The Mandalorian. The opening tells us exactly what the story is and why we should watch it. The Mandalorian is a bounty hunter, basically Clint Eastwood, but with spaceships. The space western has long been a theme within Star Wars, and so it fits perfectly with what fans might expect. Add in the talents of charismatic actors such as Pedro Pascal, and you have a winner.
I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold.
The Acolyte, Disney's latest live-action Star Wars, lacks such a hook. That, combined with its poorly written plot and a very bland dialogue, leaves it being, well, just kind of boring. The Acolyte stars twin sisters Osha and May Anasea. In the opening sequence, May kills a Jedi we know nothing about with a set of throwing daggers. This then leads to her twin sister Osha, a former Jedi Acolyte who left the Order to become a mechanic on a freighter. She's accused of the murder, as most of the Jedi are unaware May exists. Right away, we run into the first issue with the plot, namely, the holes. Osha is accused of the murder based on the eyewitness account of a single individual, and she's told the evidence against her is strong. Yet at no point do the investigating Jedi do, well, any investigation. She's on a ship full of people. You'd think an investigator might ask questions like, did anyone see Osha leave the ship last night and come back looking all murdery? You'd also think they might want to check the ship's computers, cameras, flight records, etc., to see if this Osha really is the person/droid they're looking for. But the plot needs for the arrest to happen so Osha can hook up with her old Jedi Master, Sol, and so it does. Before they can meet, however, we need a meaningless action sequence. So they load Osha up into a prison transport to head back to the capital. Thankfully, in a stroke of writer-induced luck, Osha arrives just as the other prisoners are planning an escape. And in another stroke of luck, the escape plan pulls them out of hyperspace right next to a habitable planet, instead of, say, the vast emptiness of space, or a black hole, or an uninhabitable gas giant. Sadly for Osha, the escape plan wasn't perfect, as she's left with no escape pod and her ship breaking up in an uncontrolled entry from orbit. But not to worry, our heroine has a plan. She'll use a seatbelt. Buckle up, kids. It'll save your life. Cut to Jedi Master Sol back on Coruscant. He's talking to the other survivors of the crash, the ones who ejected into space with the escape pods. Unfortunately, the unnamed rescuers didn't bother to investigate the actual crash site, perhaps believing that it would be impossible to survive an uncontrolled entry from orbit with just a seatbelt. Thankfully, Jedi Master Sol is well aware of the power of plot armor and immediately sets out to search the site where he finds Osha, something that could have been accomplished if the prison transport had simply arrived safely in the first place. Luckily for Osha, Master Sol is the one Jedi who knows that she has a twin sister, and that said twin sister may have survived the mysterious yet tragic backstory the first 2 episodes keep hinting at. So they set out to investigate this mystery, except that the plot has no time for that. Instead, May attacks another Jedi related to said mysterious backstory, and the Jedi immediately know where to go next. Their teleportation, however, is just a tad too slow. By the time they arrive, May has managed to convince another Jedi we know nothing about to commit suicide, a very un-Jedi-like act. She does this by threatening to tell the Jedi Council about that thing he did. And he just does it, without any kind of emotional anguish, or any kind of foreshadowing of what this horrible secret is, or without contemplating option C. Hey guys, I got her. That Jedi killer you were all looking for? Well, she's dead now, so no need to continue the investigation. Case closed. Nope, just an instant, drama-killing, un-Jedi-like suicide. With the mystery deepening, it's time for more investigation. Not really. There's only one apothecary in town, and it just so happens that a suspicious foreigner is running the place rather than the usual guy. 5 minutes of bland dialogue later, and they know that he did, in fact, give the poison to May. So they do an old-fashioned stakeout, which leads to an old-fashioned fight scene, and then an old-fashioned getaway. And well, that's it. That's the first 2 episodes of an 8-episode season. Then we get to episode 3, which is 44 minutes of that tragic backstory they kept hinting at. We learn that Osha and May were magically conceived by the Force to a coven of space witches. No, seriously, that's the backstory. The witches are hiding from the Republic because they're oppressed, or something. Then the Jedi arrive, and want to test the preteen twins to see if they can become Jedi because, well, that's kind of their thing. But the witches ain't having it. Thankfully, a reasonable compromise seems in reach when Osha wants to join the Jedi, and May does not. May, however, precocious little minx that she is, decides to set their little fortress on fire in a deliberate effort to kill her sister.
I could set the building on fire.
Frankly, they should have explained that one a bit better. Maybe in Hollywood, all the kids are so damaged that arson and murder seem like normal ways to act out, but outside of Hollywood, that's very much not normal. I suspect the reason the story doesn't explain it is that the big reveal is going to be that it was the Jedi who killed everyone, not the fire. The bodies, after all, don't particularly look like Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. They look more like they fell in battle. And simply walking upon a tragedy doesn't seem like the kind of thing random Jedi number 2 would kill himself over. And then there's episode 4. Episode 4 is a masterclass on how to kill any kind of drama or tension in the scene. The first bit of drama is when Osha decides that since she's cleared her name, it's time to go back to her day job. Oh no! Is that it for our main protagonist? Nope. 30 seconds of dialogue later and Sol convinces her to come back. Then they walk through a forest for pretty much the rest of the episode to reach yet another Jedi Master related to the tragic backstory. Here, the writers attempt to build tension for the looming confrontation between Osha and May. Can May be turned from the dark side? Will Osha have to watch as the Jedi kill her sister? Then, in literally the next scene, they kill that tension. May, walking through the same forest, just decides that since her sister is alive, she doesn't need to kill Jedi anymore. Huzzah! May has been turned from the dark side. I mean, it's not like you'd want to have Osha and May confront each other before that happens. And it's not like you'd want to build any kind of tension as to that decision. That's not Star Wars at all. The episode ends in a cliffhanger. May's mysterious, totally not a Sith master happens to also teleport to the same forest, and the episode ends just before we finally get some lightsaber on lightsaber action. Plot holes aside, the biggest issue with the Acolyte is that it never tells us what kind of story it is, or why we should watch it. It seems closest to a mystery, except for the fact that we already know who done it in the opening scene, and the fact that the investigators never really do any investigation. They pretty much instantly know where to go next, which kind of defeats the point of a mystery. Moreover, it lacks any of the archetypes you'd expect in this kind of story, like the hard-bitten PI who's seen it all before. I suppose you could consider it a cop drama, as the Jedi spend most of their time acting like the space police. But again, unless random Jedi number 1 was 2 days away from retirement, we're lacking any of the themes or archetypes you'd expect from that kind of story. More than anything else, The Acolyte feels like someone's homebrew Dungeons & Dragons campaign that Disney inexplicably decided to spend $180 million on. The adventure starts in a tavern, because of course it does, where we meet May, who decided to try out the Rogue class. She has to dual-wield daggers because you can't use anything heavier until you take the dual-wielder feat at level 4. She handles the adds okay, but she's totally underleveled for the boss fight. Thankfully, she rolled a natural 20 on her attack roll, and under Dungeons & Dragons rules, if you roll a 20 on a 20-sided die, you automatically win.
Say it! Look at natural 20!
May's luck holds when she confronts her next opponent, where again she rolls a nat 20 on her persuasion check, allowing her to skip the boss fight entirely.
Say it! Look at natural 20!
Osha, however, isn't so lucky. She completely whiffs her persuasion check against the space police, which means she has to go to space jail even though there's really no evidence against her. Remember, kids, charisma is never a dump stat. 10 points minimum. And let's not forget the tragic backstory. If there's one constant in any D&D campaign, besides murder hoboing, it's that everyone has to have a tragic backstory, and at some point you will hear every excruciating detail of said tragic backstory. Then we have Episode 4. Episode 4 is literally Mirkwood Forest from The Hobbit, complete with its corruption by dark magic, the dark side of the Force, and giant insectoid monsters.
He says there's something wrong here. Something rotten.
Yeah, that's Sauron. Now, none of this stuff may be particularly problematic when storytelling amongst your friends. But when you're going to make a major Hollywood production, one that needs to compete with all the other movies and television shows and streaming services out there, you need quite a bit more. And The Acolyte simply fails to deliver. It feels like the kind of story literally anyone could write. Unlike the original Star Wars, or The Mandalorian, there's nothing that jumps out to hook you and make you want to see more. Now, there's an outside possibility that this hook will show up later in the season. Ahsoka didn't really take off until the 4th episode. But we're already halfway through this season, and I still can't figure out what this story is supposed to be about. The real question is whether the audience will bother to stick around and find out. Speaking of sticking around, if you enjoyed this review, please like, subscribe, and hit that notifications button to help pump these numbers up.